Excited to do this as we gear up for the All-Star break in the second half of the NBA season. Joining us from ESPN's broadcast team and, of course, the host of the All-NBA podcast. It's a friend of the show, Tim Legler. What's up, man? Good to see you,
What's
Lex.
going on, man? Good to be home with you again. Yeah, it's not like it's a slow news day right now in the NBA.
No. Here we are. It's like 2 weeks later, and we still have meat left on this Luka bone. And that's because we were both in the building. You were calling the game for Luka's first game with the Lakers against Utah on Monday. I went to the game. I ended up getting tickets, so I was like, I want to be there for it. So before we talk about a little bit what we saw, because clearly, he's gearing up again, hadn't played in a long time. The production part of this, because you get access to both teams, you get access to the Lakers in this case. I know there's probably some uncertainty of whether or not he was even going to be able to be cleared to play at this point. So what went into that? And then, I think JJ's tried to be maybe less excited than he probably is internally about this opportunity and being respectful about the process and everything. But just some of the stuff you picked up in preparation for the call on Monday.
Yeah. So, first, we weren't even supposed to be there. I had done a game that week. Dave Pash and I were going home, and then, of course, that happens, and we want to get an opportunity to do that first game. So ESPN moves mountains to create that window of broadcasting time because we don't do Saturday matinee games on ESPN during the regular season. We don't do that kind of thing. So they created the space. Of course, Saturday, excited. Then he's not playing. Major letdown, obviously. And that game was actually kind of weird because Indiana is red hot coming into that game. Lakers don't play LeBron. They don't play Luka. They've got one big, and of course they go up 20 in the first quarter on the Pacers and win that game. Austin Reeves went off. But then we didn't even know Saturday night. Like, what are we doing? We sticking around here for the game on Monday? They finally, again, that was way above my pay grade to make that happen. We did it. But even as late as Sunday evening, we didn't know if Luka was going to play Monday. And if he didn't play Monday, I'm saying, well, then he's probably not going to play Wednesday. He's going to play after the break. Why would you play him one game? So we didn't know. But they created the window. We were prepared to do another Lakers game without Luka playing on Monday night against Utah, which was a terrible game, and it ended up being even worse than we expected. But at least he played. We got a chance to talk to JJ Saturday leading into the game. And, it was funny because it was as if he hadn't, in his words, been able to put a lot of thought yet even to what it was going to look like with Luka. Monday going into the game, when now it was clear he was going to play, we met with JJ 2 hours before the game. And again, JJ he's kind of like a subdued guy anyway. He's not like getting super amped up or giddy about it. He's just very businesslike about what it's going to be. I'm sure internally, knowing that it's a limitless number of possibilities of things you can do offensively with these two players. I'm sure his head is processing all of that and thinking about ultimately what this could look like. And then we got our first sample of it on Monday night.
Yeah, and I think to be completely fair to Luka, I don't know what any of us would have expected him not playing NBA basketball for that long of a stretch. So it was funny because I felt like the crowd was actually kind of quiet before, like the lead up to it, because it was just a different energy in the building, in that it's like, this is actually happening, as if the fans almost didn't believe that it was real. And a lot of us around the NBA still can't believe that it's real. And then the first action or whatever they ran, like I saw like Luka's down in the corner. I'm like, all right, they're going to bring him along slowly. And yes, he was completely out of shape. So you could see he was gassed early, but they kept him into like the first sub thing to kind of like that way basketball works, like get exhausted first and now start to play. And then your body will kind of come back around. So I don't think there's anything from like a basketball standpoint of going, oh, this is what they're going to do and this is how they're going to use it. It's just that when you're this good and this brilliant, like you'll just figure it out around him. I don't know if you saw anything or if that game gave us any clues to how this will work and how he and LeBron will work together. But it was one of those things where he probably was just so happy to finally play basketball again and get this whole thing behind him.
Well, one of the things that JJ talked about, and I did see it come to fruition in that game, obviously to a very small extent, he only played 24 minutes. They staggered their minutes a good amount during that time. So that's something that's a work in progress, like how they're going to, when he ramps up full speed, those guys are going to play 34, 35 minutes a night along along with Austin Reeves. So how exactly are they going to do that? You figure the first 6, 7 of the game, they're going to play together. The first 6, 7 of the second half, they'll play together. And then the last 5 or 6 minutes, they'll play together. So do the math on that. That's about 20 minutes guaranteed they're on the court together. So then it becomes, what about the other 28 minutes? How exactly are they going to do that? Now, the luxury, and Austin Reeves, he's got great command of his handle. He can get his own shot. You can run stuff through him. To have 2 of those guys on the court pretty much the entire time, that's now the luxury that JJ has. But here's one thing that I did see that JJ talked about, and he kind of got excited thinking about this. So the third best perimeter defender for every one of these teams is now going to end up on one of these guys. And he was talking about, look, he's obviously not putting Austin Reeves in the category with LeBron and Luka, but Austin Reeves is a guy that has shown JJ, he's got a lot of game. And so even thinking about him getting an opportunity to operate against the third defender, because you can't have, them on all of those guys, and very few teams have 3 great perimeter defenders. So somebody is going to get a weaker guy. And when you run the action you want, and you call horns action, and for people that want to know what's horns action, horns is, there's a ball handler in the middle of the floor, and then you come up with a screen to be set on either side of a high ball screen. So there's two guys up there setting screens, and then the ball handler gets his choice. And you come off and you pick which way you want to go. Horns action, every team runs something like that. And then after you come off the ball screen, those other 2 guys, the screeners, there can be an additional screen set there for each other where one of those guys dives to the rim. When you run all that kind of action with those 3 players involved in ball screens and then off ball screens together, you're going to end up with the matchup you were looking for on that possession. And that is what had JJ very excited, because now you're like, well, what if the third guy ends up on Luka or LeBron? What does that mean? That means absolute downhill breakdown, collapsing your defense in the paint. And, that's going to be a major problem. The other thing I saw was, hey, you run action for one of these guys, LeBron or Luka, on one side of the floor, comes off of it. There's an entire defensive shift to that side of the floor to deal with that ball screen action with those guys. Now, when there's nothing there because there's too much traffic, the ball comes out, gets to the other side. Now it's going into the side of another elite level, all-time great creator with closeout defenders coming at them with more space to operate because the first guy did most of the work on the other side of the floor. So that's the other thing now that you're going to see. So I did see some of that, very small sample size of it, but that kind of gets your head around what this is going to look like. You're talking about a guy in LeBron who this year is 4th in the league in points directly off of his passes. Last year, Luka was 3rd in the league in that category. They're playing together now. So let's wrap our head around that and the facilitation of the offense for everybody else. That, to me, is one of the biggest upsides to this entire thing. And I saw some of that, at least on Monday.
It feels silly 20 years in with LeBron, watching it live, of still being amazed by what he can do. But those hard dribble drive pull-up fadeaways, and these fadeaways that he's hitting aren't these like straight in and then back. I mean, we're talking about these crazy angles where he's just getting to a takeoff point, and then at 6'9", hitting these shots. I mean, this isn't even anything necessarily off of Luka, because he was doing a lot of this. Like, I felt like LeBron was kind of juiced up a little bit in that game, his energy, but there was some shot making from him. Again, not that anybody's sitting here going like, oh yeah, LeBron's really good. But those are impossible. They're impossible to defend. And he's actually kind of mastered this shot now.
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. And you talk about the way he looks, and then, I've done 4 Lakers games this year, so I've been seeing it quite a bit. The thing that was amazing to me on Monday was how hard LeBron was playing defensively with containment of the ball. It was kind of amazing to watch, because that's the one thing that people will, if you want to nitpick the guy, some people will nitpick that. Well, he kind of picks his spots now.
I've brought up the defensive stretches throughout much of the season where you're like, it has to be better in the playoffs. It just has to be. And he was really good on it.
It's fair. Like, you do see it. He does pick his spots when he's 40 years old. Like, he does. I mean, that's the bottom line. He didn't on Monday. And And I was wondering, he was playing so hard, Ryan, like defensively to like pressure up the ball and like slide and use his strength and just really, I mean, he really disrupted some possessions. And look, it's the Utah Jazz. You're talking about guys like Keontae George, handling the ball against him, and Isaiah Collier, and like you're not talking about elite level offensive players in this league, but still. And I was like, kind of like, wow. Part of me is like, is this part of this like for Luka to watch? Luka's never played with a presence like this, a profile like this, a guy that casts this kind of a shadow. He's never had this. So now LeBron at 40, expending that kind of energy. I'm not saying Luka's going to grind it out defensively, but I do think there's going to be a little bit more accountability with LeBron as your teammate than anything Luka's ever had. And I think that could be something that's beneficial. Something else ran through my mind during the game I thought about. Luka is different from LeBron in that LeBron I've always viewed as more of a facilitator first, which is kind of crazy because the guy's the all-time leading scorer in the history of the league. But I do think he thinks more about just putting pressure on defenses with his power and his force, but thinks more like a playmaker before the scoring comes. Luka's the opposite. I think Luka dips his toe in the water first every night. Like he sticks the thermometer in his own mouth every night first. He's done it in Dallas since he came into the league. It makes me chuckle, and I appreciate it, respect it. Because he'll come out, it doesn't matter if he's playing with Kyrie or whoever. He's just like, these first 6 minutes are about me. I'm going to try to see how hot I am because that'll dictate my night. So the reason I bring that up, when Luka was in Dallas, like at no time was Luka able to just go like, I'm just going to score right now, man. And I'm just going to totally take playmaking off my plate right now. That you guys just don't worry about it. Just watch me for the next 6 minutes. He had to facilitate for those guys. Can you imagine now a situation where like Luka, because he's more of a raw scorer than LeBron, just gets cooking early? But LeBron's like, fine, man, just go because these other dudes, I'll make sure they get shots. I can run point here for a little bit at the highest level and just go. Don't think about anything else. You have to worry about it. It'll come organically out of some of his action, obviously the lobs and the cross-court threes that he kicks out for, because that's just the right play to make and he can make it. But just I think the thought process behind it of not worrying about getting anybody easy looks if he gets cooking early in a game, that's kind of a fun thing to think about as well.
You have the broadcast of the late game on ESPN tonight, Golden State at Dallas. We'll get to Golden State. We're going to get to the rest of the league stuff here quickly. So just the last thought on this. Is there any concern that does this topic come up? I mean, we're almost 2 weeks removed from the trade happening, knowing that the job is to call the game. But, depending on how the game goes and how nasty this crowd has been, this thing is not dying in Dallas, and I don't really blame Dallas fans for feeling betrayed and everything that they're feeling here. The absurdity of this trade actually happening. You and I were texting about it right after it happened because all of us were just kind of in shock. But how you would handle that topic during the broadcast if it feels like there's a window for it.
Yeah, man. Look, I think this is like something that they might never get over. I'm not exaggerating that. I've said this, and I've kind of talked to some people around the league about their own teams that they like and follow and the players that they're fans of. And I'm saying, would it even matter to Dallas fans if the Mavericks won it this year or next year or the third year of this Anthony Davis Kyrie pairing? Would that be enough to salve this wound? I don't think so. Because number one, you may have won it with Luka too. Like you'll never know that now. They got to the finals last year. Now look, I don't know that anybody's beaten OKC this year. So maybe it's just one of those years like you're not beating that team, but we'll never know it. They did go to the finals, and I do think they actually improved their team. Now, Luka missed a lot of time. There's downside to that. You're a 500 team now with a stretch run to try to position yourself. That's a hard thing in the West to go on the road for 3 rounds. I get that, but at the same time, the benefit of it, Luka, once he gets himself into shape over the next couple of weeks, he will be so much fresher at that time of the year than he has ever been. There's something to be said for that. The year that Golden State won the title a few years ago with Steph missed a chunk of time in the second half of the season that year. He was fresher when the playoffs came around. It matters to guys with that kind of usage. So We'll never know. But here's what I do know. Whether you win it or you don't win it or whatever happens to Dallas the next 3 years, and I thought it was kind of almost mind-blowing that Nico Harrison said, I'm talking about the now and the future, and by that I mean 3 to 4 years. That's the future. You'd have a guy that's 25 years old. That could be your cornerstone for the next 12 years, if that's what you wanted it to be. You've shrunk this down to 3 or 4 years, and you start using words like culture and things like that. And we're talking about guys like Kyrie and AD. So the whole thing was kind of surreal to listen to it. But so he shrunk it to this 3 or 4 year window. Okay, let's say that you're somehow you think you're a more viable threat, or you even make a deep run, or you win a damn title in the next 3 years. I don't think that is enough to satisfy the Mavericks fan base because of who Luka represents. This is one of the greatest offensive talents to ever come into this league. And he's 25, and he's already been to a conference final and a final by the age of 24. Go look at the history of the league of guys at the top of the food chain have done that. They're all-time great players. And so Luka's already done that. And so I'm like saying to myself, well, how bad can this stuff be with the conditioning and your concerns organizationally when he's that good, that talented? And by the way, at that entertaining, that's the other thing that the Dallas fans are having a hard time wrapping their head around, man. Going to a Dallas Mavericks game was an event because of Luka. You just took that away. That's gone. So to your point, it's still bad here? It could be bad here for a very long time. And look, you win, obviously, if they make a deep playoff run, people get behind that, and they're going to be selling out, and the crowd's into it, and there's going to be a parade, and they'll be there. I'm still not sure it completely heals the wound of losing what was a generational player for a generation of fans, particularly like younger fans in Dallas. So that's what this organization is coping with, dealing with. And now we'll see what happens, once they get everybody back and what it looks like at the end of the year. This year is going to be very difficult because of these injuries. We'll see over the next 2 or 3 years, does Dallas make a run? And does that even matter as much to the fan base? Because Luka, by the way, could also go to LA and do the same thing, potentially. So they're going to have to live with that for maybe the next decade, watching whatever success he has in a Lakers uniform. So the whole thing, you and I think, are in agreement on this. It's inconceivable that a player this age of this talent could become available by the team's choosing without some sort of a scandal that they're involved in, without just being an unbearable human being on a daily basis to be around, without him forcing his way out or leaving in free agency. This just doesn't happen in team sports. It just doesn't happen. And it has now. And now we got to wait and see what the fallout's going to be.
Let's talk about the rest of the league. We're in agreement, so I have nothing else to add there, and I've already talked about it a lot here. So we look at OKC, I think, and I've mentioned this a few times, like in the summer, you're going, okay, well, if Dallas is back, and I'm with you, I thought the roster was even better this year than the finals team last year. You always include Denver in the conversation. I think most of us thought Minnesota would have a chance here. That hasn't been as good. They were terrible the other night. I know they're missing some bodies against Cleveland, but they started 1 of 20 in that game. Maybe it's just the first quarter, whatever. But it's OKC and then trying to figure out everyone else. And Denver has figured some things out here as well. There was a nice defensive stretch in there. Now it's been back more to the offense. Actually having Murray look like this is important. I also think when Aaron Gordon misses that many games, you're looking at the numbers, looking at the standing, going like, okay, but there's just certain teams where I go, I don't really know if I care about what the numbers tell me right now. So if you're looking at the West outside of OKC, who do you think is the biggest threat to them?
Yeah, I would say probably Denver. I mean, look, I've been really impressed with Memphis and Houston all year, and I've seen Memphis. I think I've called 3 of their games. So I've been impressed. And every time I've seen them, I think they've been shorthanded. So I haven't even seen them at full strength. I like them a lot. I like Houston a lot, man. They're tough. They compete. They're taking on the identity of their coach. I mean, Amen Thompson is a guy that just blows me away when I watch some of the stuff that he could do on the court. I don't know that Memphis is complete enough, and I don't know that Houston is ready to take that leap. And Houston, listen, this 6-game loser streak they just went on, people make too much of that sometimes. They hadn't lost more than 2 games in a row all year, and they only did that once. And so
Van
you're
Vliet
going to
not
have
being around. I think some of
Yeah.
those late possessions too, it shows with
No
Van
doubt.
Vliet
No
missing.
doubt.
You can just
No,
see, even if
no question.
right.
Two of
Even if
those
I
losses.
go ahead.
You're right. And I watched both of those games, and it's like that was actually what kind of stood out to me. Like, okay, how do you close games? Because it's not going to be Jalen Green that you're going to trust in that situation. Amen Thompson is not a complete enough offensive player because he doesn't really have a perimeter shot. So you can't do it there. And Şengün is a nice player. He's not on that level. So that's definitely a concern for Houston. Tight game, playoff spot. What are you going to right now to make sure that you got the ball in the hands of a guy that's going to get a good shot or make a great decision? That's a problem for them. And you saw that rear itself during the losing streak. But in general, the 6-game losing streak, okay, it's just a stretch. It's a tough stretch. Tough time of the year. It's just, whatever. Get to the break, hit the reset. And I think Houston is legitimately a very good team. I don't think either of those teams represent a real threat to Oklahoma City. I think Denver would be the team that you would look at. And now, obviously, the Lakers, man, we got to wait and see because maybe it's the Lakers when it's all said and done. Maybe it is them. And they added Alex Len, which is important. They got some size. That's going to be a problem. But I think their small lineups are going to be a problem for teams. When they play Rui and Dorian Finney-Smith with those three perimeter players, I think that's going to be a very tough lineup to guard for teams. You'll see more and more of that, I think, deeper into the year. So maybe it ends up being the Lakers. But that is kind of how I say right now it'd be Denver. Watch out for the Lakers. I don't think that Memphis necessarily and Houston are good enough in those tight spots that you're going to have to be in a playoff series.
Yeah, there'll be a big matchup there because you look at it today, Lakers are the 4 seed, and this is, without the Luka part of it. And we saw some of that on Monday, them just going, look, we're just going to downsize this thing. We're not going to care if Utah is going to play Kessler. Utah is completely outmatched. They're not a very good team right now. So that's probably not the best game to be like, hey, this is what the Lakers are going to do the rest of the time. But you could see even with Len, because it's kind of a desperate acquisition after the Mark Williams trade gets rescinded. And even if they had kept Mark Williams in that trade, I think the Lakers would look at it as saying, let's just space somebody in a playoff matchup here. Let's have Dorian Finney-Smith sit in the corner. We may give up something here, and there's going to be a game where we get out rebounded by a ton. But if you're opening up, you're playing 5 out, and you're having Luka and LeBron and Reeves attack, all the stuff we were saying in the beginning, that might be the payoff where JJ's like, I know what I'm giving up, but I also know what I'm gaining here on offense. I guess I think it'd be tough to go, okay, if you're running into, say, a healthy, big OKC team, if you're running into, what Denver is, Memphis is probably a better matchup when you look at some of the size stuff here. Let's stay on Memphis, though, because I'm with you. They're the 2 seed today. They're 11-2 in their last 13. They're top 7 offense and defense. Last night, the whole Ja thing in and out of lineup, all this different stuff that you had mentioned all the times where it feels like it's another guy stepping up, which speaks to their depth. And I think it is a team that doesn't mind who goes off from night to night. But Ja, he's missed 21 games, goes off against Phoenix last night. Santi Aldama was incredible to start the game for him. Jalen Wells, a rookie, has been like a real piece of what they're doing here. And they have guys that they can go to, and GG is back and stuff. So like, I like them, but yeah, it feels hard going, do you see them in the Western Conference Finals? And that may be too dismissive of them. And maybe it's just, here they are. They've had different versions of themselves so many times over these last couple of years, and yet here they are, standings wise, the only team behind the Thunder.
Well, the thing that's going to be very interesting ultimately, and it always is in the West, is how do these standings play out? What does that look like? I think that getting into that 3 spot is very important for Denver or the Lakers. Obviously, you don't want to be 4 or 5. You get Oklahoma City in the second round, if that's the case. So that's going to matter. So look, one of these teams is going to get there. So I think, if Denver or LA can get the 3, then I think they're going to have a really good chance to beat whoever that is in the 2 spot. If that's Memphis, they could, maybe Denver, LA end up 2-3. That's possible. That Lakers got some work to do to get there, but that's possible. You get those 2 teams in the second round. But I think the key is to avoid Oklahoma City as long as you can. Memphis is a good team, man. The one thing I like about Memphis is when I watch them, like, they consistently play very hard, and their role players on a given night, it's different guys, but their role players have an impact. I love Aldama. I have for, quite a while. He's a guy that I think is very underrated, what he does in this league. GG is a big component getting him back. He's still not close to, I think, what he can be by the end of the year. So they're deeper than they've been. But ultimately it comes down to, do you trust one possession game, 3 minutes to go? What are they going to run to guarantee that they get good action and get a good shot? If they get into that situation and you got the Lakers or you got Denver, I trust those teams more if that's who they would end up playing in a 7-game series and the winner moving on to Oklahoma City in the conference finals.
Let's look at the East. I love the Hunter trade for Cleveland because whenever I watch Cleveland and Boston, I would just go, man, these defensive assignments start off really bad for what Cleveland probably wants to close with. And they probably would want to close with Strus prior to Hunter showing up. Now I don't know how Strus closes in a playoff game unless he's just on fire and they feel like, hey, but I'm not saying Hunter's going to shut down Tatum or Jaylen Brown or other guys, but it's just another big body that they didn't have. And I love the way they move the ball. I love the way Mobley has played. You look at some of the on-off stuff with what Mobley has done. Mitchell also kind of taking that mature collective step back of like, I don't need to do this all on my own, the way I think he came up as a player because it was so impressive and he just felt like, hey, I'm going to get all my buckets and accolades and all that kind of stuff. I think he's at that point of his career where like the guys that start to win games understand I don't need to play like this all the time, although it's in there if you need him to go on like a 10-0 run because he's just that dynamic. So we know exactly who they are, and the Hunter part changes at least because prior to that, I'd be like, I don't want to hear it. Like I'm picking Boston against them. I don't care what happens in the regular season. Like I don't want to hear it. This provides them a closing group that I think makes that trade really important for them.
There is no question. And I think part of the trade was looking at the team that's the measuring stick, which is the Boston Celtics. That's who they're comparing themselves to. When you look at those two forwards in Boston and what you have to do to guard them, what they were going to be rolling out there in their rotation at those spots was going to be tough for them. I think DeAndre Hunter answers that. So I'm a big DeAndre Hunter fan. I think this primarily came down to his ability to guard some of the longer guys that can get their own offense in this league on the perimeter. That's what he's going to answer. And he can also give you supplemental offense. He can spot up and shoot the ball, but there are going to be nights he'll have a playoff game where he gets 8 points and takes 7 shots, and he's got tremendous value because of what he's doing to guard. It won't matter as much. I think the Mobley component to me is the biggest reason why they've moved this forward. Guys in this league, when they get to a certain place in terms of their confidence, it's amazing how all of a sudden they anticipate being open. He never anticipated being open the last couple of years. I'd watch him and it was just like, he wasn't in the mindset of running out onto the court from the tunnel expecting to do damage. He was a good player, a nice player, but he blended in. A lot of nights he blended in, and he doesn't blend in anymore. He's out there and he's anticipating getting the ball. He's thinking about his next opportunity prior to it happening. So when it does open up a little bit of a window for him, he jumps on it. He took 19 shots in their last game. Go back and look at last year. How many times did he even get to 19 shots? And their team has got more firepower than they've had, and he still gets that many shots on a given night because he's expecting it. He wants it. That, to me, has really changed the profile of their team in my mind. To where, look, I think for me, they're going to have home court against Boston if that's what the conference finals ends up being. Look, I'm not trying to dismiss the Knicks because I think the Knicks can go toe-to-toe with these teams, make it a very interesting series. But, it's a coin toss to me, Ryan. It's a coin toss to me now between Cleveland and Boston. And Boston, I think, still has another gear that we're going to see after the break. That you can't replicate hunger. They just didn't have as much hunger this year. They satisfied that last year. That was a quest for their organization, for Brown and Tatum. They answered that. You can't just automatically think you're going to show up the next year with this driving hunger to win. You'll get it later in the year. Denver went through the same thing when they finally broke through. They'll get it. And they might have the most talent and depth ultimately when it comes down to it. And maybe they're right back in the finals again. But Cleveland has really shored up that gap with them to where I think now that's an absolute coin toss if they were to play in a 7-game series.
Boston deserves the benefit of the doubt. And I can't really talk myself into being frustrated with them, even if there are stretches where you're like, what is going on with this team? And then, there'll be times where I I don't love what I see from them offensively. And then I go back and look at the numbers. You're like, okay, they're fourth in offense. Like, what do you
Right,
what do you
right,
want from this team?
right.
And even if I did like the side by side, because I did it this morning, I was looking at it, like fourth in offense this year, fifth in defense this year, net rating this year, third. Last year they were first in offense. It's a better number last year than it was this year. They were number 2 in defense. Net rating was number 1 overall. So there's some statistical stuff that you can point to. At 38-16 last year when they won their 38th game, they were 38-12. But when I was looking at that, I was like, boy, that seems closer than I would have expected. But then Boston went on a 22 run where they ended up at 57-16. So like there was this stretch where they absolutely cranked it up. Is there anything with them? We've pointed to collectively like guys across the board not having as good a season shooting wise. Maybe some of the like reintegration of Porzingis getting involved. Some of the Jaylen Brown stuff hasn't been great night to night. Derek White hasn't been the same guy. Like I'm kind of just repeating myself here. Is there anything that you see that's remotely concerning with them?
I think the one thing that I've seen they've reverted to a little bit this year are those nights when Tatum and Brown aren't great on the same night. Like that kind of reminded me of the years before they broke through and won it. When you would look at them some nights and go, man, Tatum and Brown, it's such a tough pairing, but they operate completely independently of each other. And so some nights to be one guy, some nights the other, and a lot of their action run on opposite sides of the floor. And I didn't think they were maxing out like the pressure they could put on defenses when they're both involved in some sort of action they run. And they felt more complimentary last year and this year there's been nights I watched them and it felt a little bit like last year. One of the things I've done with Boston all season is I just keep telling myself, this just doesn't feel the same in their head as it did last year, going for this thing and trying to get this thing across the finish line. It's just a different mentality around that. Their offseason was completely different, not only because you're a champion now, Team USA played into that. You got 3 guys there. It wasn't necessarily the best summer for Tatum, obviously, with what happened. Jaylen Brown was probably not thrilled that you got two teammates who are role players on more like role players on that team or on Team USA, and he's not. Like, there's a lot of stuff that happened over the summer that made their whole offseason different. And then you come back in and you start playing, but again, it's like, man, it's a long year. It's a grind. Everybody's trying to catch up to us. So we'll show you our best when we have to, which is going to be March, April, May, June. And I think that's probably what you're going to see. I think you're going to see just an uptick in intensity in everything that they do after they get this week off at the All-Star break.
Yeah, I know that I probably watch them too much, and some of the things that I'll think I'm being like, sometimes I'll look at it and go, okay, well, that was bad, or what happened there offensively. I mean, there's even some stuff from their clutch execution last season. I was like, could this come back and bite them? And then it's like, nope, they're just going to roll through everybody, and it's not that big of an issue. And then I have to kind of remind myself to like compare it to the rest of the league. And I want to get into this with you, right? As a great shooter, this might take a second to set up, but I was watching Portland, Denver the other night, right? And of course, Jokic had that absurd shot clock 3 in the corner where you just like want to give up. Be like, can we just go home now? this is ridiculous. But on a lesser heralded attempt and make was Simmons in the left corner, and he has the ball. It's not a catch and shoot. It looks like he's stuck, but it's Simmons, so he's not stuck if he doesn't want to be stuck. And he's flat footed. He's just in the corner. There's a guy just in his grill, like waiting to see what he's going to do. And there's not really like a ton of jab step work to get free. He just pulls up and nails this 3 from the corner. And I'm sitting there going like, I hope people appreciate how hard that shot is. It's not in rhythm. He's not even sure what he wants to do until he just says, all right, I'm going to pull up and make this. And Simmons is a really good player, super talented, great scorer. Like we already know all that stuff, but it's not like he's one of these all timers. And I think of how many guys around the league can make those shots and the skill level that we're at right now.
Yeah.
And if you look at the overall 3-point shooting numbers, like we're at the most attempts per game in NBA history, not surprising, just over 37, which is 2 more per game than the other highest mark. If you want to look at the collective shooting from 3, they're at 359, which is 10th all time. So you could take a snapshot of like last 5 to 6 years and say that 3-point number's declining a little bit, but it's not so dramatic that you think you're actually finding anything. So when I think about the people like Simmons who make these shots, Tim, that you're just like, it's not even a good shot, but he's capable of it. But then I'll think about like Naz Reid in that Cleveland game. And this isn't me to be critical of Naz Reid, but it was just something I see a lot. Is he had a 3-point attempt. It was fine during the shot clock. He didn't really even have the ball in his hands. His feet weren't set. And he's kind of not floating, but his feet, he's like lingering back. Like there was nothing right about his setup, shot decision. It was all bad. And he misses the three. And so I think that's where like an older generation will look at attempts like that going, you would be benched in my era for even thinking about it. But on the other side, when you see Simons have that kind of make, it's like you kind of have to allow so many of these bad attempts because, and I know that sounds crazy because like I feel like, Tim, I'll see guys like you didn't even have the ball in your hands. You weren't shot ready. There was nothing about you that gave you a good chance of making that shot, but you took it already. So I guess it's kind of taking the escalation of where the skill has developed to and accepting some of those bad shots where I think you can make an argument for it's both the most talented level of basketball we've ever seen sprinkled in with more attempts of like, what were you possibly thinking on that attempt where both sides aren't wrong to kind of emphasize the other.
I think it's a very apt description of what we watch every night. First of all, there's no question the number of high-level shot makers in this league. It's silly to even say more than ever because it's not that doesn't even do it justice. How much more than we've ever seen in this league? The number of guys on a given night that are capable of making incredibly difficult shots on threes of the kind you're describing, but just there's escapability to get the shot off. Everybody's got to step back. Everybody's got to sidestep three. In the league, they practice this stuff. They work on this stuff in the summer. More guys can do it. And so maybe sometimes there is a lack of appreciation of how good it is because it can be a little monotonous some nights when you watch. You were talking to me about Boston before, and anything I'm seeing, that's probably another thing I would say is just like those nights when they allow you to guard them because they'll take any one of those shots they get with the slightest crack of daylight immediately because all of them can shoot it, they'll take it. And you're just like, man, imagine if you just made a team work for 8 to 10 seconds and guard you guys off the dribble when you get into the lane and you get in your dribble drive kick action. You're never catching up to the ball, and eventually somebody takes a three, but it's a better three. Imagine if they played like that all the time. Nobody could deal with Boston. They don't. I watched a game this year where they played the Bulls, and the two teams combined for 108 3-point shots. 108, 56 and 52. Okay, and it's just like, it does get. That's why when I look at teams and excuse me, it's up my throat. I look at the team numbers going into a game, and I make it all my notes, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Like these two teams are in the bottom 10 in attempted threes, so we're going to see more tonight than just that. So, to your point, yes, I think that you're not necessarily always getting the best shot you can. You have to weigh that with. It's incredible to me the number of guys that can make good shots out of those attempts, that they are reasonable because they go in enough, and they shouldn't because they're incredibly difficult shots and they're not really putting a lot of pressure on the defense a lot of times. That is pretty much what we're watching every night in this league right now. And for Boston, I do think there are nights when I go, man, they're making it easy. They take 6, 7 in a row off of one pass, two passes. First, remote daylight. Let's get it up there. And I'm going, man, you're not, with all the talent you have, with that kind of versatility, 4 guys in your starting lineup that can beat anybody off the dribble, get into the lane. Then you got this freak Porzingis and how difficult he is to guard. All of you can catch and shoot threes, and yet you don't make them have to guard you first before you get the good three. Because I don't know that anybody could beat them if they played like that every night. And maybe they'll get closer to that when it really matters.
Yeah, and then and not to bring it up again with Boston, but my standard for them is winning an NBA title. So when I see shots where I go, what what was that? Like, you guys are too good to be doing that kind of stuff. But then I'll remind myself, like, hey, you're going to watch another game after this one, and you're going to see way worse players taking the exact same shot.
Well,
So,
hey, listen,
you know,
I do want to make a point. Like, I'm sitting there watching these games, and especially when I'm calling the game, because I can really see the bench and the coaching staff and all that that's not shown on camera sometimes when you're watching at home. And I see shots like you're describing. I don't know how many a night. My first thing is typically when I see one that I just like, it makes you kind of like sick, like you ate bad food. When you see a shot like that, like you're talking about, I'll look immediately at the bench, the coaching staff. There's almost never a reaction to it. And I'm just sitting there going, man, like, what would that be like for a guy like myself that could shoot? If I knew legitimately there is nothing I could possibly do that would be a bad shot in anybody's mind in the building, I don't know what that freedom between the ears, like where you remove all thought about good shot, bad shot, playing the right way. It's no. If you get any daylight, legs, let it fly. I don't know what that would even feel like, that level of empowerment, but that's kind of what we have in the league now. Anybody, anytime, any possession, take it if you want it. And there's no reaction from the coaching staff whatsoever. It's incredible to me, but that's where we're at. And look, a lot of it is because the skill level is so off the charts that I think they run the analytics and they think that this is going to pay off in the end. Taking that many, because there are a lot of nights where they make enough of those that it becomes very difficult to guard them.
I'll still never understand the guy that shoots it when it's not in his hands. Like, this is hard enough, man. And as a shooter, like, I don't really have it in my hands. It's like, whatever. But, and I don't want to turn this into like criticizing necessarily today's game, because I think we're explaining some of the stuff that people don't like in the understanding behind it. But like, I had two screens up on Monday night, and two teams within seconds of each other ended up on 3-on-1 breaks. 3-on-1 breaks. And both wings stayed inside the 3-point line, and both teams with the ball didn't score, like completely fucked it up. And I thought, that's crazy, because they're not even used to guys not running to the corners. So instead of like stopping at the free throw line, like all the stuff we grew up with, like stop, make the defender commit, then make your decision. Or if you're really special, like pretend you're going, some sort of decoy move. And yeah, it was because you don't really see.
You know what's wild, Ryan, is like, and I can't remember the player. I was watching a game in the last couple of weeks. There was a 2-on-1 fast break where the ball handler came down and there was a couple defenders, maybe 8-10 feet behind, running back to try to get back into the play. So you had to make a quick decision on this. 2-on-1, we were always conditioned, to take it right at the defender, force them to commit. And then if they don't, lay it in. If they do, you drop it off and the other guy gets a layup. It's a standard drill you do in middle school even, right? That 2-on-1 fast break drill. And this particular ball handler started to fan out like he was going to pull for three, like sort of like from the slot or wingish type area. The defender kind of committed to him, then it came out on him because he thought he was going to shoot. And by that time, like that, getting that pass to the guy underneath the basket was going to be hard because there were guys running back. So the ball handler then dribbled all the way to the corner on that side of the court and then shot it. So it was like literally weighing like all the scenarios. This is the worst case one, and I'm going to go ahead and let that go. I'm going to let that fly right now because this is what I've processed in the moment. And what also I'm noticing is the reaction of the crowd in the arena on like really bad shots is also non-existent because it's kind of like what they watch every night. It's just like, this is the way the game is played now. This is what we do. So, but again, I think your original point's the best because this doesn't want to come off like we're criticizing players.
Exactly.
The bottom line is, there are more guys on all of these rosters capable of making these kinds of shots than we've ever had. So as a result, there's a lot more leeway given to the players, man, to be able to sort those things out. The one thing I like now is like when guys come on the floor, they're in whatever minutes that you're a 15-minute player. Like for those 15 minutes, like from the first time you touch the ball, go ahead and shoot it. And that is also a different mindset. Like it used to be, you're going to play 15, 18, 20 minutes, right? You're going to come in the game. You're going to go up and down a few times, man. Touch it a couple times, right? Get into the flow before you would really think about shooting the ball. Because you've been sitting over there for in real time, probably 20 minutes by that time, the start of the game. So that's what you're meant to. Now it's just, I like the fact that coaches allow guys, hey, man, you play 15 minutes, make the most of those 15 minutes. If you're a shooter, go ahead, let it fly. Every time you get it while you're out there. And if one of those nights, you miss your first six, then maybe, that'll be the coach's decision. I'll go somewhere else for those last few minutes, whatever. But for the most part, you're empowered to do what you do. And it's immediately as soon as you step on the court. No one is blinking an eye. If you check in, you're still tucking your jersey in and you catch the ball and shoot it. Like no one cares if that's the case anymore. And I kind of dig that, man, as a role player and a guy coming off the bench shooting threes. Like that would have been nice.
I don't care who you are. There's nothing worse than looking over to see if you're going to be subbed out while you're trying to play. And I don't know that these guys have to worry about that much anymore. Couple last things here before we finish up here. I don't want to keep you too much longer. I was looking at some of the Golden State numbers because, I think the Jimmy Butler acquisition is just what can we do to raise the floor? What can we do to close with five guys that are better than what we had before? So I understand it motivated Butler. He's looked really, really aggressive here with Golden State for a couple games. But knowing how Golden State plays a beautiful game, and they still with this limited version of themselves this year, because I think a lot of it was run the action with Steph, it gets shut off. All right, everybody pretend we're going to do something, and now the ball ends up back in Steph's hands. And I just don't have a lot of criticism for some of the efficiency with Steph because I see what he's being tasked with doing. I've also used this argument for Booker at times where it's like Booker runs the first thing and then everybody tries to figure it out again. And then it's like, all right, Devin, save our ass, depending on how the minutes are aligned, right? So Butler provides something they have not had. They still lead the NBA in passes per game. Which is just kind of who they've been fundamentally here for a long time. How do you see Butler? Let's talk about those closing minutes. How do you see him in a big spot and then kind of what Golden State could be capable of with the best version of him?
Yeah, I can't wait to see him tonight. I've only seen tape. I want to see the game tonight. I'm anxious to call this game to see exactly stylistically what this does to them, how it changes them. Look, he gives them an edge. He gives them some toughness. He's got a lot to prove. He's definitely highly motivated right now. I mean, he got crushed in terms of the perspective on Jimmy Butler with the way it ended in Miami. And look, it's ended like that in a few places. But right now, he's definitely highly motivated and anxious to get out of that situation. He's found himself in a very healthy situation. Great guys, great coach, great system, great joy for the game, and much needed. Like his particular skill set, get to the line, win the tough mid-range stuff, battle, compete, give you more defensively. So he's going to address all of those things for them. And I think one thing that Steve Kerr talked to me about earlier this year when I did one of their games was interesting. He said a big reason why Steph's numbers are kind of down by his historical, norms because of the lack of three-point shooting they had of their bigs. So he's like, every night we're getting a big guarding Looney, Trace Jackson-Davis, or even Draymond at the 5. All they're doing is standing back in the lane. As a result, a lot of the action they run where they get cutters and they get slicers, and a lot of it's not even designed to get necessarily a catch for a score in the lane, but it does force reactions out of guys. And then the next thing, here comes stuff off a dribble handoff because there's space on the perimeter. That was taken away. He's like, it's so congested in the lane because these defenders are just, of the 5, are just standing back there. So all that stuff we run is just has no purpose. So now teams are high siding Steph. They're hard on the outside hip. None of that action is he getting open on. He's working so hard to get freedom and space. Well, now all of that attention paid to him, you can't if Jimmy Butler is gobbling up all of that extra space that's available when he gets the basketball. It's a totally different way to have to guard them. And I'm very curious to see now the impact on Steph. Even in the first 2 games, I can see it's energized their team. And so it stinks I'm not going to get a healthy Dallas team tonight. I won't get to see what that looks like, but we'll have a lot of topics on Dallas that have nothing to do with how it looks tonight. So I'm sure they'll get their fill. But I'm just as excited, even more so, about seeing what Golden State looks like with Jimmy Butler and his impact on Steph Curry specifically. But I do think, look, it's going to be a tough road for them. They're coming from a 500 spot, trying to climb some rungs in the ladder in the West. There's other teams in the same boat. So they're a team ultimately could get their act together, play really well going into the playoffs, and would not be an easy out. Can you expect right now, as we sit here, a deep playoff run for the Warriors? Probably not. But again, with question marks around Houston, around Memphis, Lakers, this all has to work for them. There's other teams right now that are still also figuring stuff out. Let's see how the Warriors look in comparison.
Right, and the Warriors sitting there in the 10 seed today, but only a game up on Phoenix, San Antonio in the mix, and then, of course, Portland after a really nice stretch. I mean, they lost a couple, but I mean, I just would, as a basketball fan, like the play-in part of this, depending on the seeding too. So you could argue, well, Steph shouldn't even have had a chance. There's another time where he's eliminated when they were a top 8 team. You're like, all right, this guy going to turn 37 and not be in the playoffs after they trade for Jimmy Butler. Legs will be on the call that one tonight. Again, Golden State at Dallas. It's a late game on ESPN. And again, make sure you check out his All NBA podcast as well. You're the best, Legs. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you.